what would prompt us, or why would we have the audacity to ask the National Science Foundation for $20 million to study water in Utah? And the reason is pretty simple. Utah is the second driest state in the nation. Just last year, we had the second most severe drought across all of North America. Utah was hit particularly hard, with 20 of our counties considered as drought disaster areas. The timing couldn't have been better to ask NSF for money to understand water resources and shortages at a time when we had one of the driest summers on record. Our 20-year record of what's happening to our snowpack, which is of course the essence of our water source in Utah, is that it's decreased about 60% over the last 20 years. The model predictions make that even a worst case scenario with up to 70 to 75% decrease, and that's one of the things we need to understand. The climate has changed, of course. This is a graph that most people have seen over the last 1,000 years. We've had a 2 to 3 degree on average increase in surface temperatures. In the western states, that's been even higher. And so what that's doing is sort of changing the mix of snow and rain that we get, as well as the timing. Utah has the second cheapest water rates in all of the nation. The reason for that is we have an almost perfectly efficient water system. It snows in the winter. That snow is stored up high in the elevations in the mountains. In the spring, it melts and runs downhill. Gravity works and is free. It runs into lakes, streams, reservoirs, and some irrigation canal systems at just the time our agriculturalists need the water most to begin the growing season and enhance the productivity. So water is free, not by hook or crook, but simply because we have a pretty good system. Given these temperatures changes and the decrease in snow, our perfectly efficient system is just going to go haywire. We're not going to have the snowpack probably. We're going to have more monsoonal rains that come in the fall, which doesn't help you much if you're a farmer. And we don't have the storage capacity. Our infrastructure in terms of dams, reservoirs, and canals are built for spring storage, not fall storage to store through the winter. So we likely face some pretty big issues associated with our water supply and how we're going to sort of disseminate that water for an ever-growing population. You saw this morning, the NOAA seasonal drought outlook. In our part of the world, there's no relief in sight. Droughts are expected to persist for the foreseeable future in our particular area. The other thing that's interesting about Utah and the West in general is this is the census data from population growth. And of course, in terms of absolute numbers, the metropolitan areas in the Northeast are increasing at alarmingly high rates. But it actually turns out that the Wasatch Front from Ogden down to Provo is the fastest growing urban front or metropolitan area in terms of percentage of increase. Over the last 20 years, our area has increased by 49% in terms of people moving into urban areas. That poses particular problems when you think about water resources and how to deliver water and water quality. So if you put all this together, and lots of really smart people have in terms of different modeling approaches, you can see that we are predicted to have water supply shortages already and in the coming future, and that's simply going to be exacerbated by more people, more demand, and changes in climate. So we're growing. We'll have about 5 million people by 2040. We're the second driest nation. Our climate is changing, and that combination of snow and water is really the thing that's got us the most worried because our infrastructure simply doesn't match what's likely to change. So our sustainable future has to be understanding the mountains, the snow, and what's happening in these valleys that are becoming increasingly populated. So we need better downscale models to make these predictions and help water managers. We need to be better, have better data to actually say what's going to happen from year to year so we can manage the water much more wisely. We need better snowmelt to surface water quality and quantity models. We need a better understanding of the urban hydro system, a very complicated thing that most people haven't really thought about. An understanding, of course, of the valley transformations. People are moving from agriculture and suburban areas to the urban areas. What does that mean? How people make decisions? And then we need better communication of our science and data to our stakeholders and especially our water managers. So to that end, one of the things we're doing with this money and this grant is we're building a series of sensor networks from the snowpack at the very top of the mountains down through the cities. We're doing this in the Bear River, in Red Butte River, and the Provo River to provide real-time data to help us model supply, demand, quality, quantity across various kinds of landscapes in various kinds of climate conditions. This is just an example of the sensor network that we put in Red Butte Creek. These data are beamed via cell phones, satellites, however we can do it, up to a data storage center at Utah State University, and then are actually sent to the Wyoming Supercomputer Center, where the data are sort of stored, cleaned up, and then served to anybody who wants them in near real time to run simulation models and look at projections and predictions. So I think an extremely valuable resource. This is one of the puzzles that we don't know. Most people in the world don't know this. What happens in the urban areas? We have all kinds of pipes, stormwater drains. We have roads. Those of you who were in Salt Lake City in 1983 remember when 4th South became one of the largest rivers in Utah as a consequence of rain on snow event and early spring melting. But we really don't have a good picture of what happens when water hits the Ogden Valley and moves through this urbanization. We know that what comes out the other end is really bad quality water that has pretty negative impacts on the ecosystems of the lakes and the wetlands. So one of the things we've already started is sort of these kinds of water budget models to try to understand how water is changing, how quality is changing. This is from Court Strong at the University of Utah, who started working with a series of grad students on sort of understanding this urban hydro scale. And finally, you can't do any of this or understand any of this outside of the context of humans. And so we're putting a whole lot of effort in sort of a social sciences emphasis where we're really trying to understand people's perceptions of climate, of water availability, of water sustainability, and how they make decisions and try to understand how we might affect those decisions to help long-term sustainability. And I think Carl and Dan might talk about this. They're sort of helping us lead the efforts in the social sciences aspect. So as Rita said, we have lots of opportunities. Part of the fun of running a project like this is that we have lots and lots of fellowship money for undergraduates, K-12 students, teachers, graduate students, postdocs, faculty, etc. We're looking for bright young people. You're the future, and we want to do everything we can to attract you to the science of water, science and engineering of water, and help us with long-term solutions. Thanks very much.
Standing right next to me, so I'll make this very quick. Dr. Carla Trentleman, and she's actually an environmental and natural resource sociologist. I was taught sociology full-time here at Weber State for 5 years now. Our primary research interests focus on community, especially natural resources and the environment. So with that, please give a warm up.
It is still morning. Thanks to Todd and Rita for giving the overview of the iUtah project and the larger F4 program that iUtah is funded through. I'm going to be focusing on a project that Dr. Dan Bedford and I are working on here at Weber State, using iUtah to help us focus on water issues as a part of campus sustainability. So we're really going to change it up here, actually. I'm going to be focusing on campus sustainability as a start, and then talking about where we're going in terms of Weber State and how iUtah can connect. The International Journal of Sustainability in Higher Education was published. The Association for Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education was founded just 5 years later, And their first journal published their first volume in 2008. So you can see this is a very recent kind of thing. Now, if you're not familiar with this kind of thing, with the Google Ngram viewer, this is a phrase graphing tool that shows a yearly count of whatever phrase you tell it to look for in the over 5 million books that Google has digitized. So if you plug in the phrase campus sustainability, you get this graph. And it verifies how very much a newcomer this whole issue of campus sustainability is. Now, the way that this works is that it doesn't show up on the graph if the phrase is found in less than 40 books. And so we see that campus sustainability, that was the case for campus sustainability until about 1994. Saw a little bit of a blip until 2000, and then from 2001, it's really taken off. Okay. Now, in that time, if we look at the themes and the foci of campus sustainability work, climate and energy have been the dominant, have dominated the scene, with other issues lagging considerably farther behind. For example, waste management, transportation, water, and yeah, this is what Weaver State's parking lots tend to look like. Yeah, we haven't gotten to those issues yet. And so, for example, if you look at the ASHE homepage, the only topics that are included specifically, there's a lot of general stuff on campus sustainability and sustainability stuff, but the only topics that are included specifically are related to climate and energy. Those are the only two topics that are actually named. And of course, those two topics are very connected to each other. Now, if we think about it, this prioritization makes a whole lot of sense, since energy, in particular, is where campuses can and do quickly see tremendous cost savings. It's easy to sell conservation as making sense economically as well as environmentally. And so that leads us to a situation, though, of what my colleague Dan calls water being before a relative. Now, we're also seeing this in our early stages of exploring literature about water's role in campus sustainability. For example, I'm part of an environmental sociology listserv, and the members of that listserv overwhelm my inbox all the time on a regular basis with all kinds of discussion and debate and notifications about their work on climate and on energy. Okay? So, but knowing that these folks are really willing to share their research, their work, as well as references to other literature that they're familiar with, I sent out a query to the listserv asking about water use and sustainability on college campuses. The response, near silence. These are some examples of the responses I did receive. A number of folks referred me to campus sustainability programs that included water. In a couple of places, they referred me to campus water centers. However, I didn't get any responses that talked about research on water issues in terms of campus sustainability. And again, that's what we're focusing on with iUtah, is more the research kind of end of things. And this appears to be the case pretty broadly, although I do need to say that Dan and I are very early in our review process, so that's a really preliminary kind of overview statement to make. Now, getting back to the topic of campus sustainability more broadly, here at Weaver State, we see some parallels to these recent national trends and concerns with campus sustainability. Because of a really effective sustainability team here at Weaver State, in the last 6 years, we've gone from basically not much going on at all to tons going on in terms of campus sustainability. That team includes a very active and involved environmental club. And I just need to do a shout out to them because y'all are sitting here today a whole lot because of folks in the environmental club who actually got the Sustainability Summit at Thursday rolling in the first place. So that's the kind of active and involved club we're talking about. In addition to them, we have the Environmental Issues Committee, which is a faculty senate committee that is also very involved in issues here on campus. And then our sustainability office, which you can see came on board in 2009. And these are just a few of the examples of tons and tons of things that they've accomplished just in that very short amount of time. Now, as we've seen with the national trends, Weber State Sustainability Office has focused particularly on energy, which of course is related to climate, through a combination of finding and fixing inefficiencies, conservation measures, and introducing green technologies such as lots and lots and lots of solar panels. Excuse me. We're seeing tremendous cost savings that are increasing annually. We've also been focused on building green, and in fact in 2011 we won an EPA award for one of our buildings. But again, here, much of the focus here is on energy as well. Again though, this focus on energy makes tremendous sense, both for its connection to climate change, connections, which if you were in the last session, you got a real heads up on why that is so important for us to be paying attention to, but also the financial benefit of this whole thing. In fact, the savings in energy costs that are being realized because of all of this work, that pile of dough is responsible for funding the other projects that the Sustainability Office is being able to work on, including their work most recently on water. Now, Weber State has begun working on water issues. For example, they've started going through building by building, replacing bathroom fixtures, so looking at, putting in low flow toilets, urinals, faucets. They've made really good progress on the library. That's the first building that they started with. They've also just collected the first year's data on secondary water use here at Weber State. That secondary water use isn't being metered or monitored anywhere in our local contract area where our secondary water comes from. So Weber State had to come up with a way to do that. And so they've just collected the first year's worth of data on that. And now they're working on metering each building on this entire campus separately so that we can see what the water use is, what the culinary water use is for each different building, which then will allow them to see where are their inefficiencies, what are the buildings that are having particular problems. But again, like with those national trends, there's been less focus and a later focus on water than on energy. Some of this is due to these issues that are noted here. These are really different issues than the issues with energy in a number of respects. So one thing is that in Utah, in the Intermountain West, but particularly in Utah, as Todd just mentioned, as Todd just mentioned, it's more difficult because of the way that we bill for water here. It's more difficult for us to realize cost savings by conserving water. And so that creates a challenge. We tend to think about water differently than we do about energy also. For example, we often don't think of water as a scarce or even a finite resource. We all learned about the water cycle. And so, it's fine because it's all going back and coming back up and going back down. And so because of those kind of perspectives, it does get a little bit more challenging to get folks to buy in terms of, not in terms of like the sustainability team, but in terms of the folks they've got to sell it to, okay? There is substantial interest in focusing on water, There is progress being made, but it has just been more difficult to get things off the ground. I should mention, though, that Weaver State is holding a year-long series focused on water topics this year, the Waterworks series, which has brought in all sorts of water-related topics, speakers, films, etc. It's been an incredibly wonderful multi- and interdisciplinary focus. However, it hasn't focused much on water use, conservation, and sustainability here on campus. And the focus that it has had has been primarily educational. So again, that's great that we're doing that, but we also need to be doing these other kinds of things. So this is where iUtah comes in, okay? As you heard from Rita and Todd, iUtah is examining water issues across the state. Dan and I are bringing that iUtah focus here to Weaver State to partner with our environmental team here in looking at the water ecosystem that our campus is a part of, to sort out how we can become a more knowledgeable and hopefully better member of that ecosystem. Our work here at Weaver State is a pilot study for iUtah for the state overall. Where the plan is for it to be replicated at other campuses across the state. And in fact, Dan and I have already heard from a campus back east who's really interested in our work as well. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at doing here on campus with iUtah. And here are some of the research questions that we'll be working on as part of that. Remembering that iUtah brings a multidisciplinary focus, we're going to be involving folks with a diversity of perspectives and skill sets in the work that we're doing over the long haul. We want to learn collaboratively with others here on our campus, but also with other campuses and other agencies. And that stands to you.
Dr. Dan Bedford, received his BA from Oxford University in England and MA and PhD degrees from the University of Colorado in Boulder. After 5 years teaching in Vermont, 2002 he concluded, this is my favorite part of the bio, the West is the best. And so he gladly accepted his current position in the geography department here at Weaver State University. So please welcome him to the stage.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks to Audrey and Carla for that fabulous setup. Really terrific to get the overview and marvelous introduction to what we have in mind to bring iUtah down to the Weaver State campus scale. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the opportunities for engagement with the iUtah grant system. And the simple way of talking about opportunities for engagement with iUtah is that there are lots of them. There are lots and lots and lots of ways to get involved with iUtah. Now, that may come across as a little bit of a glib response, and it may make for some short talks. So let's be a little bit more precise. There are academic opportunities, and there are community opportunities. Now, setting it up like that, although I'm going to talk about academic opportunities and community opportunities separately, I do want to emphasize that there's actually an awful lot of overlap between the two. We're really trying to make sure that it's not the academics in their ivory towers or going off into the watersheds up in the high mountains playing with their instruments and then publishing their data in obscure journals that only other academics are going to read. We want to make sure that the work that we do is pertinent and relevant to the community. And we want to get the community engaged in the iUtah process as well. This whole idea of examining both the physical aspects of water and the social aspects of water, the physical sciences and the social sciences coming together in much the same way as I'm trying to represent the academic and the community sides coming together as well. So, that said, let's take a look at each one in turn, even though, keeping in mind, there is overlap between the two. So, the academic side of things. The academic side of things addresses undergraduate, graduate, and faculty opportunities. So what are the opportunities at each of these levels to get involved with iUtah. For the undergraduate level, any Weaver State undergrads in the audience? Raise your hand if you're a Weaver State undergrad. Fantastic. Raise your hand if you are an undergrad at another institution. Even better, superb. So, there are lots of opportunities for you guys. In particular, we are pushing the undergraduate research aspect of engagement with iUtah. So, opportunities for students to get hands-on experience playing with water in all its wonderful forms. So, going out digging snow pits, thinking about the kind of snowpack that we're getting and how that snowpack is changing. So, we're talking about that in his presentation. We are seeing over the long run a shift more towards rainfall and away from snowfall. So what kinds of changes do we actually see in the snowpack? Getting people out and physically measuring that stuff is something that we need to do. So there's opportunities for undergraduates to get involved in that kind of work. But not just snow, also the liquid form of water as well. Coming up in the summer, we will have a series of opportunities for research experiences for undergraduates. Undergraduates can pair up, team up with research scientists at the major research universities and at other institutions as well, probably, like Weaver State, to get involved with doing research that the faculty are currently conducting. So opportunities there to get involved for undergraduates. At the graduate level, same kind of thing. Opportunities to support graduate students. We currently have 14 graduate students being supported through the iUtah program. They're doing really fascinating interdisciplinary work. They're connecting the physical sciences and the social sciences and the engineering in really innovative ways. So if this kind of thinking appeals to you, if you're about to graduate as an undergrad from Weaver State or from another institution, you're thinking about maybe going on to graduate work, maybe iUtah with this interdisciplinary approach is the right path for you. And at the faculty level, there are opportunities for faculty, not just at the R1 institutions, the major research institutions, but also primarily undergraduate institutions, the institutions that often don't get as big a piece of the research funding pie as perhaps we would like. So we are rolling out, this is the first year of the project, and there's a research catalyst grant opportunities with a deadline of March the 11th, which is coming right around the corner, so that's a week from Monday actually. So if there's any faculty in the audience who are potentially interested in research catalyst grants, keep in mind that the deadline is coming right up, it's a week from Monday. So these are grant opportunities that are going to emphasize interdisciplinarity, so working with multiple disciplines, ideally working with multiple institutions or multiple agencies even, so you don't even need to be working necessarily with other academic institutions, you could be working, pairing up with government agencies, municipal, state, federal agencies, like for example, Utah Department of Natural Resources. You could be working with non-governmental organizations. You could be working with any number of different possible partner organizations. So again, this is this connection between the academic and the community side of things. Now, critical question is, how do we find out information about all of these various opportunities? There's lots of funding. I was talking about how much money there is available for many of these projects. How do you find out the details? Now, I can tell you the details, but who is really going to remember all of those fine details presented in a section like this? What you want to know is where to go to get information. Of course, the place you're going to go to get information is the website. The website has this address. When you plug it up there all in one word, it looks a little strange. It's iutahepscore.org. But an easier way to remember it is to remember that it's iutahepscore.org. Right? That's the place to go. Plug that into your web browser, and you get this. This is the iUtah website. And the place to look is down here. That small text, you probably can't see that, especially in the back, maybe not even in the front, but what that says is opportunities. Remember, there are lots of opportunities to get engaged in iUtah. So this is the place that has all the links to detailed information, the application deadlines, the budgets, the allowable budgets, the kinds of projects that we're looking for. That's the place to go. Listed under opportunities, we've got, right now we've got the Research Catalyst Grant opportunities with that March the 11th deadline. That's for faculty at primarily undergraduate institutions. As we get more and more information on things like the research experience for undergraduates, that will be posted here on the opportunities section as well. And remember, even though March the 11th is a quick turnaround, for example, for research catalyst grants, this will be coming up again next year. So maybe this year is not quite the right time. Maybe you need a year to get ready to talk to colleagues, to set up partnerships with other organizations, other institutions. And next year will be the time for you to go for a Research Capitalist Grant. So keep in mind, this is not a one-shot deal. This is not just 1 year. It's happening again and again and again. It's a 5-year project. And you can find it all at iUtah.org. Did I mention that already? Okay, that's the academic side of things. What about the community side? A whole bunch of different interesting opportunities here. In K-12 education, citizen science, agencies, NGOs, and industry. And that's just a few of the things that I could think of. iUtah has probably picked up. It's a very large project, and there's lots of different pieces to it. These are just 3 that stood out to me. So, K-12 education. K-12 education opportunities. Just a couple of these. There's a Summer Institute coming up, and again, this is not just this year, it's going to be happening again and again for 5-year duration projects, and maybe beyond that, we get renewal. So, the Summer Institute is going to involve K-12 educators working with iUtah research scientists, actually getting field experience hands-on in the summer in the watersheds where they're doing the research. And that's a fantastic opportunity to get hands-on experience and take that hands-on experience back to the classroom. There are also resources being developed, again, through iUtah, the Utah Museum of Natural History, which will be available not just to K-12 educators and K-12 field trips, but to everybody. So keep in mind that that's another of the partner institutions, and there'll be opportunities there too. Citizen science. We've got some fantastic partners already doing great stuff with citizen science. Utah Water Watch, they've got some wonderful pictures. This is one of their website photos. They've got some wonderful photos up on their website, Utah Water Watch. They've been doing citizen science for a while. They're really good at it. They've got a lot of engagement and involvement. And they've got wonderful pictures like this. Just ordinary folks out there doing watershed science, measuring the water quality, figuring out what's in the water.